Throughout this course, we have primarily been focusing on individual pieces of the PHP language. And while that has been okay, if you're like me, it's just not enough. Going over the theory is okay for getting an idea of how something works, but it's not until you actually start working on a project that things start to click. So we are going to start building a project in this lesson, and we will build this project throughout the remainder of this course. And we will touch on some of the things that we have talked about thus far, and we will also incorporate some new ideas. So classes, working with files, working with a database, namespaces, organization. There's a lot of things that we are going to cover. And in this lesson, we are going to start with organization, because when it comes to a project, the well-organized project is the one that is easy to work with. And that is our goal. We want to organize our project so that it is easy to develop. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on separating concerns. That is a concept that is not just used in PHP or web development, but development in general. The idea is that you have different components within your application that are responsible for doing one thing and one thing only. And the idea is this. We want to take our logic, which is what I'm going to call a controller. We want to take our logic and put that inside of another file. That file will be the controller. And then we want to take everything that is responsible for displaying the output. So all of our HTML and including all of the echoing out stuff. That is going to be inside of another file called a view. So we have a controller where our logic lives, and then we have the view, which is our display. So these two things, they are going to at least know about one another, but there is not going to be any displaying stuff in the controller. There's not going to be any logic in the view, except for, looping over an array in order to output something or echoing out stuff. So if we look at the login.php file from the session lesson, then we can see the stuff at the top. This would be considered the logic. So we will take that and put it inside of a file, and then we will take all of the markup and put that in another file. So inside of 4.1, let's create two files. The first is going to be index.php. That is going to be our controller. And then we will have another file called index.view.php. Now you could say index.html.php or index.templates.php, but view is the term that is used industry-wide, so it makes sense to use view. And the basic idea is nothing new. It is something that we have used really ever since we started using templates in this course. And that is, if we look at login.php, we have set this title variable, and then we have included this header.php, and then that title variable is used inside of header.php. So we are essentially going to do the same thing in that inside of our controller, we'll have our title, and let's just do hello world for now. And then we will include our index.view.php. And then inside of index.view.php, we will simply echo hello world, or not hello world. We want to echo our variable. So if we go to the browser and let's go to index, we see hello world. So that's pretty simple. But, since we are talking about organization, it makes sense to organize our files into folders that are similar, so that if we are going to have multiple views, well, we need to put those inside of a folder called view, so that anytime we need to work on a view, we know right where to go, to the views folder. So we're going to create a new folder inside of 4.1 called views, and we will move our index view into that folder. So now, whenever we include our index.view.php, we have to say include views index. And really, let's do this. Let's do require there. So now, let's just make sure this works. It does. So we're on the right track. Now, I don't really like this for a couple of reasons. For one, whenever we have a controller in a view, we are going to have to do this in every file. We're going to have to require views / and then the view name. I would like to make this as simple as possible so that we could do something like this, view, and then we could specify index. And then the view function would then be responsible for tacking on everything else and actually doing the require. So let's create a functions file. And functions.php, yeah, that ended up in 4.1. And we will have a code block, and we will have a view. We will get our name as the parameter, and then we will require, and let's do this. We will say views, and then name.index.view.php. And so if we save this, we need to go back to index, and we need to require our functions.php. And we no longer need this require because our view function is going to take care of that. So let's go to the browser, let's refresh, and we see undefined variable title. But why? Why doesn't that work? It's a global oh, if you forgot about it, don't worry, I did too. Global title. We need to import that to the function. So now when we refresh, we see what we expected to. Okay, but this is a problem because we're going to call view multiple times, and it doesn't make sense for us to come in here and add every single global that we are going to use. That's just not sustainable. So instead, we can give this function another parameter. And this is how we will get data to this function so that it will be in scope for our view. And we have to keep note of this. I'm going to call it model because that's essentially what this is. A model is, well, it's the data that we are going to be displaying. The model is another term that is used industry-wide. So we're going to have this model variable inside of our view. So let's go ahead and go to our view. Let's change this to model. And then we are going to call our view function, and we are going to pass in that model. So in this case, that's simply title. Now, whenever we refresh the page, we still see hello world. And of course, if we come in here and we say hello model and refresh, then we of course see that change reflected here. So this is great. And so let's do this. Let's take some of the includes that we have been using, like header, and let's include them. So we're going to go to login.php, and we're just going to copy all of this markup, and let's paste it inside of our view, and then we will do this. Now, unfortunately, we have just lost our title variable, but that's okay. We can eventually change that, but for right now, let's get rid of all of the stuff that we have in our content, or at least most of this. And then for our H1 element, we will use our model here. So let's output that here. We will use our shorthand, and we will say model, and there we go. So if we refresh the page, we are going to see the undefined variable title. That's okay for now, but we see hello model. Okay, so we have somewhat of a solution, but it could be better, because I don't want to include the header and the footer in every single view. That's just something that I am going to forget, and I don't want to have something that I'm going to forget. So what we could do is use what's called a layout page. A layout page is essentially a template, but it's a complete template. It's not broken into individual files like our header and our footer. So inside of our views folder, let's create a new file called layout.view.php. And we are going to take the contents of the header file. So let's grab that and paste that into our layout view. Let's get rid of the PHP because we don't really need that, although we still want access to our title, at least for right now. And the footer was just the closing tags for body and HTML. So we'll just go ahead and add those in there. So now we need to incorporate this, because what we will do is have our content here. So basically, our content is going to be our view, in this case, the index view. We can get rid of the header and the footer because now we are going to rely upon that layout page. And our view is simply going to be this. So there's nothing that we have to forget. We just have our markup, we start using our data, and then we're good to go. But we have to make this work. So instead of bringing in or requiring the named view inside of our view function, we will instead do this: require layout.view.php. And then inside of our layout view, we're going to require the actual view. Although we need a PHP code block there, don't we? So let's do that. We will require. Now in this case, we don't need the views prefix because we are in the views folder. And so we will just require the name. And then everything is just going to flow on through. So let's see if this works. And it does, although we are still missing our title variable. So let's address that. Now, we don't want to use something as generic as title because there is going to be some information that we want to bring, not necessarily just into our layout page, but we might also want to specify some arbitrary information that would still be used in the view, but it wouldn't necessarily be the data that we pass to the view, kind of like what we've done here. So instead we could, have something called a view bag or something along those lines. I apologize, a view bag. And this could be an array so that then we could add in, whatever we need it to. So if we wanted to bring in a title, then we could do that. And in this case, we could say, what was the title? Hello World. Or that's too close to hello model. Let's say this is the title. And then we could use that inside of our views. So let's go to our functions. We, of course, need to say global and then bring in that view bag. But then that would give us access to it inside of our layout. So that instead of using our title variable, we could say view bag and then title. And then we would essentially do the same thing everywhere else. And this would also be used, I think we used it inside of the index view somewhere. No, okay. So let's go to the browser, let's refresh, and there we have, this is the title, we have the hello model. But, there are going to be some pages where we might not set anything in the view bag. So let's comment that out. Let's comment out this other line, and let's refresh. We don't get an error, so that's okay. Although we might need to address that at some point in the future. So we have just organized our application into two pieces. We have the controller, and then we have the views. And we are just going to have to keep going from there. So in the next lesson, we are going to start looking at working with files. We need to know how to open up files and read files and write to files. And so we will do that in the next lesson.